We promote, support, and sustain a nurturing care environment, a society where all children realize holistic development. We promote, support, and sustain a nurturing care environment, commitment and inclusiveness, mutual trust, respect and integrity, partnership and collaboration, promoting ECD environment, a society where all children realize holistic development.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining the webinar. We are starting right on time. It's exactly 1 minute past 3, and we are very delighted to have everyone join in and be part of the meeting. My name is Ruth Mwendom, and I will be moderating today's session. We'll go through 3 presentations, and then we'll get into a question and answer session. Just to introduce the webinar, this is one of many webinar sessions that the ECD Network for Kenya has put together, arising from the need to ensure that there is coordination and collaboration among different stakeholders in our different spheres of influence. So today we start at the governance level, which we believe is a very important and critical component that allows us to be able to ensure that every child has the best start in life. We will begin by getting remarks from a very accomplished and someone who's had a lot of influence in the ECD ecosystem in terms of practice, in terms of research interventions or implementation science, as well as policy influence. He has sat in several technical committees, and he has really moved forward the governance conversation in the context. We'll welcome Oscar Kadenge. He is currently serving as the director at Parenting and Lifelong Health. He also serves as the board chair for the ECD Network of Kenya, and he'll provide us with brief remarks as we move along. Karibu sana, Oscar.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Confirm that you can hear me well.
We can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, participants. Good afternoon, all of you who are supporters of the ECD network. Thank you for making time to be part of this conversation today. You all know that the ECD network is a member organization that gives voice to children's matters in the early years in this country. We are a committed entity that seeks to build strong multi-sectoral collaborations that promote nurturing care for early childhood development. And we are glad, like Ruth has rightly mentioned, to be part of this webinar, which aligns with our goal of being a vibrant network that enables learning, policy influence, and advocacy in the ECD space. The network is committed to moving with each one of you on this call from policy and evidence generation, which have been our mainstay for a very long time, to actions that will help Kenya achieve or reach the SDG targets that it has set for itself and as part of its global compact. The ECD network for Kenya is now positioning itself as the preferred, not just ECD think tank, but also the ECD think and do tank in Kenya. And we are glad that your participation in this is actually buttressing that position. And we believe as a board and as a membership organization that this is the direction we need to take to make ourselves relevant in this space today. This platform is going to be open to partner organizations who are here and those of you who will join us, because I believe that we would like to have many more partners joining us to showcase the work that you are doing on behalf of the children of Kenya and the pathways to scale that you're taking. We are open to having you register as members, and I just want to say this on behalf of the network, that in 2024, please join us. You can go to our website. The Secretariat can paste a link in the midst of our going on with this conversation today to allow those of you who are not registered members of this particular network to be members as of today. There are benefits that come from that, including being part of this community of practice, being part of the many training opportunities that come up, being allowed to participate in global and regional fora at discounted rates, being part of the group that can actually participate in articulating issues on behalf of children in recognized formal forums within the country in various ministries. And there are many things that we can also continue to just say about this. So today's webinar is one that the board of directors, along with the membership, appreciates the participation of the eminent panel, including a CEC who has given time of himself, his time to be part of this, and also, a guru like Dr. Simiyu to be part of this conversation that is going to build the knowledge and ability for us to be able to move this discussion forward. So on behalf of the ECD Network for Kenya, I want to register my appreciation to the panelists and also to the Secretariat for organizing this, and to Ruth for being such an astute moderator. And I want to say welcome, and let's begin this conversation. Asante sana. Back to you, Ruth.
Thank you, Oscar, and thank you everyone who's joining in. Just to take us through the modality of the webinar, we will be going through 3 presentations, different perspectives. We'll get to hear from a multilateral organization, that is UNICEF, conversations around ECD, and then we'll also get to hear from academia study that was done on governance by the ECD network in collaboration with mathematics. Lived experience of an example of a county that has been able to establish and to and get to hear the lessons, the insights, as well as call out some of the gaps that we are seeing in different counties. Are done. We'll have an opportunity to we'll have an opportunity panelists on a few questions that were submitted pre-webinar, and then we'll the chat, which will be responded to by the rightful question and answer platform is open, will be open at the onset presentations, so that people can start recording any concerns that they may have. Please note that some of the questions have been packed for future web. Look in depth at some topics, including policy, budgets or financing. Very exciting and useful conversations we need to have with landscape. So allow me to welcome Dr. Simiyu and his colleague Tege, who will be taking us through a presentation that speaks to promoting the governance in Kenya. So we'll have 10 minutes to take us through the presentations. Please, question and answer session. Karibu sana, Patrick. Karibu sana. Dr. Simiyu is a specialist in governance and economic reform to speak to matters children in his position at UNICEF, together with his colleagues.
Thank you, Ruth, and Brother Gadenge and colleagues online. Good afternoon. I hope you can hear us clearly. Ruth, you can confirm if I'm audible.
Sibu, I confirm that you're audible. Thank you.
Okay. Should I share my presentation or it's going to be shared by guide me?
Your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Greetings from the representative of UNICEF here in Kenya, Dr. Shaheen Nilofa. She gave us authority to speak to this forum. The whole UNICEF fraternity. In UNICEF, we have an ECD task force, which cuts across all the work that that agency does in supporting Kenya. And that's probably the first point that we would like to make on this presentation, that early child development cannot be delivered by one sector. It has to be delivered across several sectors with a lot of interconnectiveness, because you are talking about early life, maybe 0 to 8 years, 0 to 7, 0 to 3. And for you to get a health, prosperous early life, you are talking about quite a number of services. So integration of those services, whole government approach, and very well thought out coordination frameworks are extremely critical. The presentation we're going to make is going to come from the lens of financing, because at the end of the day, you need to deliver services if you are a government like Kenya, and you're going to put money around those services. So UNICEF with the government of Kenya undertook a public expenditure tracking survey for early child development in about 9 counties, basically to try to understand issues from policy to planning to how the money flows, and really try to summarize how is Kenya performing. So this is the presentation. So that slide speaks about generally our population. The point here, if you look at the pyramid on your left, it is basically very pointed at the top. We are talking about the ages running from 0 to 4 to around 5 to 9, and that bottom is quite heavy. And if you speak about children is up to that layer of up to 19. It is very wide. The message there is Kenya is basically a country of young people, and early child age of 0 to about 8 years. Those two bottom pyramids are quite heavy. You're talking about a population close to 11 million people. Kenya's population is just 50 million. So really, when you're speaking about ECD, you are talking about 25-30% of Kenya's population. So really our policies and budgets need to reflect that pyramid. The big question is it reflecting that pyramid? When you start doing the analysis, the slide on your right basically compares, the developing countries and the developed countries and what causes death. Colleagues, I implore us to just take 1 second and look at those two scenarios. Developing countries, look at 0 to 8 years. And don't bother to look at numbers, just look at the blue. 0 to 8, nearly everyone is dying. In the developing countries, look at the developed countries. There's no death in those early years. What is it communicating to us? That actually in a developing country here in Kenya, chances of survival are quite rare. What does it mean to our policies, our services, and so on? Next slide, please. So linking the previous slide in terms of those many deaths of children when they are still young, there is directly linked to poverty. So unless we address poverty, colleagues, these things remain a mileage. So this slide is asking ourselves, when we take child multidimensional poverty, and I would really like to emphasize that statement, multidimensional, not just money, but it's about what drives poverty. The services that we require to kick out poverty in a country like Kenya and what is related with poverty. If you look at that graph from 0.08 downwards, is very heavy positive. Basically, it is saying that if you live in the rural area, if you are a mother with no education and you are facing climate shocks, probably disabled, or you are orphaned, and really you are not accessing proper health care, there are very high chances that you will be very poor and that child will be extremely poor. So rural area, mother's education, a mother who doesn't have much education, the reality of climate change, disability, if that child is an orphan and they are not accessing much health care, there are very high chances that that will be a very poor child, and most likely they will die. Do our ECD services respond to that reality? Next slide. So how is government of Kenya spending when you put where our budgets are going as a country vis-a-vis the poverty status of children? Now, the map on your left basically points out to child multidimensional poverty. And colleagues, look at the percentages of poor children in those counties. You know, Mandera, 9 out of 10 children are poor. Marsabit, 9. Turkana, 9. West Pokot, 8. Samburu. So if you take 10 children and put them online, in those counties of ASAL regions, 8 out of 10 children will actually be poor. So nearly every child in ASAL regions is poor and vulnerable. And the map on your right, given that reality, when we take per capita spending, so you basically take the total budget spending and divide it across the population, is the money actually going to where poor people are? So what is the finding? That actually Kenya is getting right. There's more spending in the poor counties compared to the amount of money being spent per person in the well-off counties. So there's a positive correlation between per capita spending and multidimensional poverty. So Kenya is getting it right, but poverty is not reducing that fast. What is the issue? There is money going to those regions, maybe 4 times to the regions which are better well-off. But when you look at the drop in poverty, it's not moving as fast. Where is the missing link? Is it in targeting? Is it in inefficiencies? Next slide, please. What does theory tell us? This is basically the Heckman's curve. It's basically saying that the more you invest in early years, the higher the returns. If you look at your left, prenatal 0 to 3 and 4 to 5, that is where there is highest returns on your investment. The more people get older, however much you invest on them, the return on investment is less. So put money in ECD, the returns on per capita is quite high. So $1 you invest in those early years, you get $17 to $24. So business case here is a no-brainer. Are we doing it? If we look at our budget, it's no. Next slide. So when we now go into analysis of the real expenditure in Kenya, I've talked about the poverty. On average, 5 out of 10 children in Kenya are poor. You go to the ASALs, 8 to 9 will be poor. Now, 11 million children 0 to 8 years are actually poor in this country. What are they suffering from? They don't have water, sanitation, and nutrition. Those are the three biggest drivers of child poverty in early years. But are we responding to that? Look at our financing for ECD services. It's just 0.9%. If you take the total budget for this financial year of 3.6 billion, it's only 0.9%. Colleagues, less than 1% is going to ECD services for 0 to 8 years, which is just 0.4% of GDP. So in summary, Kenya is not putting money on ECD, yet that's where poverty is. But with the money going there, it is heavily going on early learning and a bit of WASH. Now, big thing here, colleagues, nutrition, which is the biggest driver of multidimensional poverty in early years, is actually getting no money. So unless Kenya puts money in nutrition, we will not see poverty out of early years going away. But the positive thing is that majority of the money that is actually being spent on ECD is local funded, it's not foreign funded. Actually, 93% of money in ECD is Kenyan taxes. It's a good thing, but we need to increase it. Next slide. So some of the major findings as I conclude, as I've said, Kenya is not investing money in ECD. Kenya is spending $81 per child per year compared to East African region countries, 138. Remember, Kenya's economy is stronger than most of the East African countries, but Kenya is spending actually a third of what other countries are spending in ECD per child. It's a big question, colleagues. Where is the problem? As I've said, funding of Kenyan ECD money is local, which is a good thing. But then 30% of that 0.9% in ECD cannot actually be traced at the ECD facility level, either in a hospital or an ECD center. We are not saying this is corruption, but it disappears somewhere in the pipe. We need to find out where is it disappearing to. And then the facilities, either health, education, water facilities, 40% of those facilities said they do not even have a work plan or seen it. So where are we planning from? Is it from the county upwards? I thought plans need to come from the ECD facilities, the health facilities, the water facilities. So the planning is not from that level. And then the issue of release of resources to the spending units, there's a huge delay. So efficiencies need to be improved in there. So I will leave it there, colleagues, because of the time. Thank you. The recommendations can come later. Ruth?
Thank you very much, Dr. Simiyu, and thank
Is it just me? I seem to have lost hearing anyone.
Yeah, Ruth dropped off.
Okay. Sorry for that.
Someone from the panel taking over.
Stella Mbugwa.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly. So thank you so much, Dr. Simiyu, for enlightening us on promoting a nurturing environment for young children through international governance in Kenya. And what stood out was that, poverty is not reducing fast enough in the country. And that was very informative. And there are a number of questions, but we will wait until the end. So participants, please hold your horses. And next, we would like to invite Dr. Mwoma, who is the National Coordinator for ECD Network for Kenya. And Dr. Mwoma will give us a presentation on governance on ECD in Kenya, as an ECD systems measurement study that has been conducted by her and others, which she'll mention more about. And so over to you, Dr. Teresa, to take us through your presentation. You have about 10 minutes. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Stella, for this opportunity, and thank you, colleagues, for joining the webinar. Welcome to my presentation. It seems that somebody is echoing.
Not on this end, Dr. Teresa, you're good to go.
Okay.
Everything is fine.
Okay, it's like I'm hearing an echo. Can I stop my sharing? And then the secretariat to share, because when I open it, it speaks. I don't know whether I recorded or something. Yes, thank you so much. Welcome to the ECD systems in Kenya with a focus on governance. And this is a study, a collaborative study that we conducted with Mathematica, and the study was funded by Conrad Hilton Foundation. Just to give an introduction, next slide, please. And this is a continuation from what Robert presented. In terms of the child population, Robert has clearly indicated that between 0 to 8 is around 11. And when we look at the KNPS 2019, 0 to 9 is around 12.2. And those children who are 0 to 3 years are around 4.7 million. And those between 4 and 5 years are about 2.5 million. When we think about children's development, and we make reference to the Kenya Demographic Health Survey of 2022, we notice that 21% of children aged 24 to 59 months are not developmentally on track. Robert alluded to stunting or nutrition issues. 18% of these children who are under 5 are stunted. And when we look at these children with the lens of where these children are living, we realize that 20% live in the rural areas and 12% live in the urban areas. When we look at the stunted children from the lens of the wealthy index, we realize that 28% of these children come from the lowest quintile, while 9% comes from the highest quintile. And from the mother's level of education, we notice that children from mothers with no or low education are around 20% who are stunted, and those from mothers with secondary education and above are around 9%. What this tells us is that when we are thinking about systems and in terms of service provision, then children from those backgrounds who seem to be disadvantaged should be given priority. Next. Coming to the project itself, what was the main objective of this project? The main objective was to develop an actionable ECD systems measurement framework to enable data collection related to monitoring in relation to 4 thematic areas, that is policy in early childhood, governance, multi-sectoral coordination, and financing. And the focus is both at national and the county level. The project had 2 phases. The first phase involved reviewing documents, designing an evaluation and measurement framework, coming up with the systems to be measured for the various thematic areas, and then using this framework that was developed to collect baseline data, both secondary and primary, and then disseminating these findings. Next slide. In terms of methodology, we used a mixed methods approach where we collected both qualitative and quantitative data, and we came up with ECD systems indicators that will be used to measure policy, governance, multi-sectoral coordination. We collected data from qualitative data from 4 counties through key informant interviews and focus discussion. But also we collected data through desk review using a data extraction template that we came up with, and that is the data that we analyzed. Next. In terms of governance, there were 3 indicators that we were looking at. One was focusing on capacity building of frontline workers, and in this case, we are referring to pre-primary school teachers training and healthcare workers training on the science of ECD oral care for child development. But also the other indicators was focusing on looking at the number of county departments that are tracking implementation of the nurturing care. Next. In terms of capacity building, on the graph on the left, it shows on average the number of community healthcare workers who have been trained between 2021 and 2023, and we found that from 19 counties, there were 18,093 healthcare workers who were trained. And when we looked at which areas they were trained, we found that it was focusing on child development, nutrition, maternal and child health, among others. On the right is training of preschool teachers. And we realized that when it comes to preschool teachers, while our focus was on training related to nurturing care, we noticed that the trainings that are reported in the documents that we were reviewing focus more on upgrading teachers' qualifications and how implementation of competence-based curriculum can be implemented. And on those parameters, we noted that from 20 counties, around 19,000, the previous slide, please. Around 20 counties, that 7,000 teachers were trained on in those 3 years under reference. Next. We were also keen to find how multi-sectoral coordination is happening, and we realized that there was lack of publicly available documents talking about how multi-sectoral coordination is happening, and therefore we relied on qualitative data which we collected from 4 counties, that is Siaya, Nairobi, Mombasa, and Kajiado. In terms of financing, we noticed that 47% of the counties had posted ECD activities, focusing on 3 departments, that is health, education, and children's services. In terms of budgeting, we realized that when it comes to the Department of Health, while our focus was for children between 0 to 5 years, we realized that budgeting is done based on programs, whether it is preventive, promotive, and all that. No specific budget is ring-fenced to focus on children. So the children will benefit from the services or the budget that has been allocated for the different programs. Next. Next slide. So in terms of conclusions and recommendations, we are saying the county governments, they need to demonstrate stronger commitment to supporting skill set for the frontline workers, but also allocating resources for training, focused training that can enhance nurturing care. And also promoting sharing of best practices and coordination models. For instance, today we have Siaya here to share how they are managing in terms of multi-sectoral coordination, and also having structured financing mechanisms by ring-fencing budgets for ECD is both critical, both at the national and at the county level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mwoma, for taking us findings. We will now go to our final presentation that will be done by Dr. Otumba, who is a public servant as well as a researcher and a statistician who's able to give us findings of a lived experience or an actual model that has been implemented in our context so that we can be able to draw some learnings and as well as governance issues that have come up in the course of implementation. Karibu sana, Dr. Otumba.
Thank you so much, Ruth, and good afternoon. Good afternoon, Ruth.
Good afternoon, Dr. Otumba. We can hear you loud and clear.
Yes,
Please
thank
proceed.
you very much. I'm here to present the CIA model, which we call SmartStart CIA. And just as a brief, that is the journey of the SmartStart CIA. This is a program that was started in 2018, and it is hosted at the office of the governor, and the governor is the champion, and the first lady is the patron. Next slide. It started in 2018, and it is patronized by the first lady and implemented by a multi-sectoral team. In this case, our multi-sectoral team, please go to the next slide. Yes. Now, the multi-sectoral team is patronized by the first lady, and it comprises of county departments. For us in CIA, it comprises of all the 10 departments of the county, and is chaired by the CEC member in charge of governance. We also coordinate with the national government departments and our implementing partners. We have PATH, we have KMET, and we have World Vision. We also have Hilton Foundation. Now, the aim is to create a platform for children which are who are 0 to 8 years old to reach their full developmental potential. That means that we consider the first 100 days. Allow me to mention that that age of 0 to 8 captures the age of 5 and of 0 to 5, whom we then call the young age. Then we have the early childhood age. Now, CIA is also a member of the Lake Region Economic Bloc, where we have 14 counties from the Lake Region, and the main coordination of much of our education programs at the LREP are done by the Secretariat. So this LREP Secretariat is also a key member of the coordination of that program. And as we can see in the next slide, we have the coordination structure, the multi-sectoral team. You can see the governor is the champion. Then we have the extended executive committee, which consists of the executive members. Then we have the secretariat, the chair of the county level multi-sectoral team, and then we have the sub-county level ward champions and community caregivers. So you can see that almost the whole county is involved, not the county government, but the government plus everybody who is in the county government is involved. That is how we coordinate. Now, one key milestone in our multi-sectoral approach in CIA is that we have 2 centers of excellence, one in Bondo, another one in Yala. And you can see in one of the images, the first lady of CIA, Madam Betty, is accompanied by one of our key partners, and they were visiting the Center of Excellence in Bondo. Now, training, next slide, training is adopted for the care for the child development, and we have a package that has been used to integrate the child development counseling and monitoring of routine health services and other sectors. The health department has been very key in terms of caring for the development of the child. And because it is early childhood development, when it comes to schooling, then the Department of Education comes in and the Children's Services comes in. When it comes to issues water, we have the Department of Water. And in terms of school feeding, we also have the Department of Agriculture involved. Then the integrated nurturing care component, because we are a whole government approach, through the multisectoral team, we advocate for each department to put some resources for the nurturing care for ECD. And that is then for CI, it is captured in our CIDP, and it is captured in our annual programs and annual budgets. And again, in relation to all our departments, we have managed to fast track a number of bills through the assembly. The bills that have gone through the assembly are, for example, the Siaya County Nurturing Care for Early Childhood Sectoral Plan, the Siaya County Early Childhood Policy, the Siaya County Agricultural Sector Policy, the Siaya County Health Services Act, and currently we have a policy on school feeding, which is yet to find its way in the assembly. In short, we use a connotation in Siaya that Nyathi and Mwando. Nyathi and Mwando means that a child is a golden property. Nyathi and Mwando, that is what we call our program in Siaya. And in conclusion, next slide, the final one. Now, the Nyathi and Mwando program is now a county program. We call it Smart Start Siaya, and it has led to a paradigm shift in early childhood development. It covers all the components of nurturing care. That is the growth of the child. And we still need more to be done, especially in policy formulation and resource allocation. But as at now, we know that Siaya is leading in the region in terms of nurturing care, and we also continue lending support to scale up nurturing care in other regions and within this region of the Lake Region Economic Bloc. Mine is that short because we are building from the research findings by the ECD network that sought to promote multisectoral coordination in early childhood education. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much.
Last slide. Our last slide says that if we change the beginning of the story, we change the whole story. That is the rallying call from CIA. Last slide. If we change the beginning of the story, yes, that's one. We change the beginning of the story, we change the whole story. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Otumba. Thank you very much for actually demonstrating to us that if we change the beginning of the story, we change the whole story by having great political will at the county level and also at national level. Thank you very much, all panelists, for the presentations. I believe we've been able to see the sequencing of governance all the way from the global space, where if we are looking to change the story for children in the global south or anywhere in the world, that the return on investment, that is for every dollar invested, we have a return of about $9 to $24, as was demonstrated by UNICEF. And then we also had research findings from the measurement study that was done by Mathematica and the ECD network, where key features were pointed out as critical in the creation, coordination, and accountability of ECD in the country and beyond, and how different areas are performing, how different deficits are showing up, which all go back to financing and prioritization. And at the national level, I think we can all agree the financing really has a great part and keeps the parts going. And then finally to the CIA model, where we see a very intentional approach that has been taken up by the governor and the different political figures within the community, as well as the implementation organizations, as well as research to advance ECD in the context. So there've been a lot of gains made in that context. And for a long time, Siaya has really been one of the counties that is spoken of as a model, as a best practice. So now, please allow me to go to the question and answer session. We had a few questions that we received pre-webinar, which I will direct the different panelists. And I will start with Oscar, who is the chair of the ECD network, who has a vast experience in ECD, and he can be able to respond to this question. So Oscar, kindly tell us how you think that governance can ensure key protections for children in Kenya. How can governance be used as a tool to ensure key protections are safeguarded for children in our context? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. I appreciate the panelists for the good work that they have done. Allow me to begin by saying that Kenya is one of the countries that is known to have ratified the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. As a result of which, you know that we have in the country basically gotten to a space where we have indeed provided for the 4 Ps to be able to take effect in the country. This is provision, protection, participation, and prevention within the child rights arena. We have other international and regional instruments that we have also ratified, which include the Convention on the Rights of Children, the Convention Against Torture, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which essentially speaks to caregiving, and then the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We have the African Charter on Human Rights and People's Rights. When you look at all of this, they have translated into some form of action in the country. And in terms of just creating that enabling environment and making sure that there are structures in place for this to happen, we have policy development and review of laws that has been undertaken in this country, starting with the Constitution, which in Article 53 articulates, all issues around the protection of children. You have the Children Act 2022, which essentially, again, amplifies just what are these particular areas that government is committing to be able not just to push for the protection of the rights of children, but also for the realization of those rights. We've had changes in the juvenile justice system within Kenya. If you talk about children's courts, desks at various points, that speaks to the fact that, in terms of governance, we are creating an opportunity for children to also participate in this system within the ambit of their rights. I've just come across a lot of research. We've done a lot of monitoring and evaluation studies in this country. And right now the mandate is sitting within the National Council for Children's Services to be able to support us in terms of coordinating all of this so that we have a system where, again, our children do not become subjects of research that becomes the kind that, messes them up. But we are now having a system that is structured so that a repository is being developed at the moment that will allow for all of this research that we have in the country to also be of use for policymakers to make decisions that are informed. The other is resource mobilization. You heard what Dr. mentioned. If we have 93% of resources here, but of course the percentage being so low, it means that there's at least some effort going in. And if again you break that down a little further, you'll notice that a lot of that resource is coming from caregivers. But now we are beginning to go to the space of asking for the ring fencing of this in terms of just making sure that protection issues around children are addressed. Advocacy, webinars, conferences, media participation, and partnerships. Issues such as ending harmful cultural practices, getting out of school children back to school, and so on. All those are also actions that promote the protection of children. Thank you, and over.
Thank you very much, Oscar, for that very comprehensive response regarding governance ensuring key protections for children in our context. I'll move on to the next panelist, who's Dr. Simeu, and the question directed to you is around ensuring equity in service delivery for the Kenyan/African child, because we acknowledge that we have other countries represented on here. So how can we ensure that uniformity, particularly considering all aspects of the nurturing care framework, is attained in service delivery for children?
Oh, thank you, Ruth. Is equity uniformity? I don't think so. So I want to discount that first. Equity is not uniformity. Uniformity is equality, isn't it? So how do we ensure equity? I think I'll go back to the slide on us understanding data on what is the need, what are the challenges being summarized around poverty. So you want to allocate resources utilizing evidence. So one of the quick things you quickly look at is per capita spending by the budget. So that slide on how is Kenya performing on targeting resources on per capita with poverty, I said that actually Kenya on average is getting it right. Kenya is spending 4 shillings compared to 1 shilling in counties of very heavy poverty burden in children. So the country is getting it right on equity. So these things you see about equalization fund, this kind of money added to ASAL counties, ETC, scholarships, that's pushed towards equity. What needs to be done is push more what I would call macro policies to continue applying evidence, and then you factor that evidence into the macro policy in terms of allocating money. There's very big opportunity around the unbundling functions discourse that is going on in the country with about 292 billion identified. How that money is going to be released eventually in terms of spending. And then when it arrives, for example, to the counties, how the counties then further release that money based on evidence will be very critical. So that's how I'd answer it: evidence, link it to macro policies, and link those policies to how you allocate budgets. Very big gap in workforce around child protection. Congs to the government. Recently, actually, the government agreed to hire at least 50 social development officers based on evidence. Again, is evidence that there's pushed towards a little bit of equity issues. But generally, Kenya is on the right track. I think it's just pushing that more and more in the macro policies. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Simeu, and thank you for leading us to the next question. You really highlighted the need for evidence-driven allocation of resources. And given that there's some steps towards generating evidence in the ECD space, we want to hear from you, Dr. Mwamam, how we can strengthen the ECDE research in Kenya to allow us to arrive at the level of making those macroeconomic policies that will be able to ensure that equitable financial as well as planning is done at our in our contexts. Thank you, Dr. Mwamam. So how can we strengthen ECD research so that it's good for uptake for governments to be able to make decisions based on this evidence that we are generating?
Thank you so much, Ruth. And I want to respond by saying that we need to be intentional in terms of how we are programming or implementing programs on early childhood development by ensuring that any programming or implementation of programs we do has a research component so that we are able to use research findings to respond to the needs of society. Number two, I'm also thinking that it is important to use evidence that has been generated to influence or to inform policy so that proper guidelines are provided in terms of implementation of programs. I know many times when it comes to getting funding for research, it is a bit challenging, especially when you want to respond to specific needs. You will realize that unless we use research funding opportunities available, especially those who are in the academia, using research opportunities available like from the National Research Fund, and writing proposals based on the needs that needs to be addressed, then that way we will be able to address the challenges that we have. I know sometimes we get called for proposals to address specific areas with specific themes, but other opportunities that arise where you can send unsolicited proposals to donors or funders to fund specific issues that are affecting areas related to early childhood can also give an opportunity to strengthen research in early childhood in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Moma, to those insights around research and how we can ensure that research is co-created to ensure that its uptake is actually beneficial to the different stakeholders involved. Now, I'll go to Dr. Otumba. And given the very robust implementation model that Siaya County has implemented over time, we would like to know some of the challenges, particularly as it relates to financing and perhaps the legal structures that you've had to bridge as you've implemented the Smart Start Siaya, so that we can learn from you. So we'd like to hear just one key issue that Siaya has faced as it relates to budgeting and the legal frameworks.
Thank you so much, Ruth. You disappeared on us. Welcome back. Because we are operating in a political environment, we need to be aware of the fact or alive of the fact that the challenges, number one, the budgetary constraint that is normal in county governments. For us in Siaya, how we have managed to overcome that budgetary aspect of it is that in as much as we have the nurturing care in our CIDP, the budget is then spread through all the 10 departments. So each department has a contribution to the kitty. So it's not only one department trying to struggle with the budgets. Two, our partners are very supportive. I talked about KMET Hilton Foundation Path and Plan. They've been very supportive in terms of finances. So every year they put in some money to run our programs, and that is how we manage to bridge in the gaps. One challenge that then we face as a county and as a government is trying to integrate national government policies or national policies with county policies. You realize that currently the ECD policy is not yet in place, it's still under revision. We have the child protection policy, we have the child protection policy, the gender equality policies. Those ones are meant to cascade from the national government into the county government formation. So if we approach a wait and see, then you find that much of those policies do not bear fruit because we have to wait for them to be implemented. And that one really affects a number of things that we do. So for us, we have tried to customize the policies, come up with ours, and try and implement them as we wait and see how we will be able to integrate with the national government policies. Those two are the major challenges that we have had. Financial is for everyone. For us, the partners have been supportive. And then on the policy formulation and actualization, those two are what we have really captured. So by way of solution, we also wish to learn from beyond our borders, beyond the country called Kenya. I think in the next few weeks, we will be visiting Dar es Salaam, and we hope that we'll be meeting colleagues from other countries, and we'll be able to also learn from them so that when we face such challenges, they also tell us how they've been able to overcome those challenges. Over to you.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Otumba, for those remarks and that very important implementation lessons that you've been able to take up. And now you're on to the next level of benchmarking with other stakeholders, just to ensure that we continue to improve practice, we continue to improve how policy is taken up within the ECD ecosystem. So with that, we are at 4 o'clock. We are exactly at 4 p.m. I would like to really thank everyone who has joined this webinar. I believe we've all been able to take a nugget and some insights that would enable us to push forward, to amplify our voices as stakeholders, as people who stand in the gap for different children across our different areas and our spheres of influence. Each one of us can do something in our capacities, at our workplaces, in our homes, in places where we have a sphere of influence. I believe we'd be able to cascade this information that we have been able to get from the webinar. A lot of the questions, we've tried to condense them and they've been responded to very, very comprehensively. However, there will be, there's been a lot of engagement on the chat or on the question and answer platform. And this engagement will not cease. We'll continue engaging in the coming months leading up to our next webinar. And we welcome all of you to be a part of this webinar because every voice matters in ensuring that every child, regardless of where they are able to have a good start to life. So thank you very, very much and have a lovely evening, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Have a good evening.
You too, and thank you all for joining.
All right.
Bye-bye.